Ballad of Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read to you by Jim Nail. Chapter 14, Mars, Part 1. At last, in the fading twilight, he saw the glow of a roadhouse ahead. This time he knew it was a conventional roadhouse with its porch and windows and its open door. Faded parchment lanterns festooned the linnet. He heard voices inside and caught the aroma of food. Surely, even in this strange world, certain things were held in common. People still gathered to eat. How could it be otherwise? As he neared the building, he saw feathers, gnawed bones, and food scraps littering the splintered porch, and the ill-fitted wall boards were bare of paint. Above the open door, chipped glass tubes curled to form words. Food, drink. Directly below, hands scrabbled on a board tacked to the doorpost. Free beer tonight. The first thing he noticed when he stepped inside was the smoke. The room was full of it. It wasn't just the smoke of roasting meat, although there was that too. People at the tables were inhaling smoke through short, glowing reeds, blowing it out through their mouths and nostrils. The smoke hung stratified in the air. It smelled like peat fire or the smoldering of wet sagebrush. There were no long tables. Men, most of them fat, with beards matted down to their chests, clustered around waist-high slabs of wood. Some wore no shirts, only buckskin vests over bloated bellies. A cacophony of drunken, careless voices and the stench of sweat and spit filled Johnny's nostrils. There wasn't a woman to be seen. Johnny scanned the gloom for a place where he could sit alone. All the tables were taken. At one table, in a shadowy corner, a dark-skinned man sat alone. Dressed in a sashed and rumpled tunic, he looked like someone come from a festival in which there had been a brawl. His eyes followed Johnny's passage across the room. Men slouched from stools onto a corner. Behind the corner, a dour-faced man wiped a dish on his greasy apron. Chunks of meat sizzled on a grill, and on a shelf behind the grill, an array of bottles. Johnny took a stool with no one next to it. The counterman grunted. "What you want?" "What do you have?" Johnny asked. The man turned, took a glass tumbler, and started filling it from a spigot. "We got sliced beef with taters, or we got corn chowder." He plunked the tumbler down on the counter. "Here's your beer." "I don't drink beer." "Well, y'all drink that one. It's free. Now what you eat?" Beef. That's cow meat, isn't it?" The man squinted his eyes and shook his head. "No, it's the meat of skunks we finds dead on the roadside. What you think? Of course it's cow meat." "I've eaten cow meat. I'll have that." The counterman scooped up a few slices of cow meat and a mound of potatoes onto a metal plate and clanged it onto the counter. "Could I please have some water?" "Swatter in the beer." So Johnny ate the meat and potatoes and sipped at the beer. It was only the second time he'd eaten cow meat. It was greasy and grisly, and the beer was topped with a head of green scum. He glanced at the men sitting on either side of him. They turned their faces and moved away. The dark-skinned man in the corner was still contemplating him, nodding slowly. Johnny turned away, as he had learned to do in such situations. He concentrated on the food. Didn't drink all the beer, but he cleaned his plate. His stomach churned and his feet twitched. He tried his best to sit and savor the nourishment and the faint euphoria of alcohol. Eventually his restlessness grew too strong and he stood from the stool. "I thank you, kind sir, for your victuals," he said. The counterman looked at him. "Where you going?" "It's dark. I need to find a place to sleep." "Aren't you gonna pay?" The word meant nothing to him in this context. He had only heard it used in terms of awareness. Pay attention to what I'm saying. Pay no mind to that child. I don't know what you mean. Pay. You know, money, coins, bills. The counterman rubbed his thumb under his other 4 fingers. "Only the beer's free." This just made him more confused, and now he noticed people were turning their heads to look at him, paying attention. He sensed danger. He had to think of something, and he knew he couldn't just flee. "I have a mandolin. I could play you a song if you like." There was silence at the counter, all clattering spoons brought to a halt. Every breath held. One man, his broad back hunched over his beer, began to twitch, his breath voicing a cold, suppressed snicker. Others joined in, snorting and through their noses a private, mocking cruelty. The counterman leaned close to the ear of the hunchback. "He's got a mandolin." The hunchback smirked and turned his head, but not his body. "I had a mandolin once. Tasted like chicken." Someone coughed. Someone else slapped a knee. A wave of pig-like laughter began to circle the room. Next to the hunchback, another man curled his lip to reveal a ridge of toothless gum. "Oh, that weren't no mandolin, Bobster. That were a horn pig." A man with his head in a bandage stood up and drew his face close to Johnny's like he was inspecting a piece of meat. His breath smelled like feces. "Funny looking beastie. Where you s'pose you comes from?" The toothless man scratched his chin. "More'n important, what you s'pose he tastes like?" "Probably tastes like a horn pig." "Yeah, probably tastes like a mandolin." Johnny backed up, but he didn't dare turn. He heard the sound of chairs scraping behind him. He looked down at his backpack on the floor by the counter. I'm just going to take my things and leave now. You won't see me anymore." A stumble of bodies approached him from all sides, and a jolt of panic raced up his spine. He leaned over to grab the pack, but an arm snaked around his belly from behind. It cinched up suddenly. With such force, a glob of undigested potatoes spewed from his mouth. "Horn pig, I think," grunted a voice behind him. "He's kind of soft and squishy." From the corner, a clatter, a chair knocked over, and a blur of color moved across the room. In front of Johnny's face, a dark-skinned hand grabbed a light-skinned arm by the wrist. "Let him go, Blankface. I know this man. He's with me." "He ain't with you, Mars Daniel. He ain't with nobody. He's a sojourner." Oh yeah? Well, maybe you'd like to taste my blade on your throat. Johnny felt his body drop. His knees struck hard on the stone floor. In pain, he rolled over and came face to face with a pair of black leather boots. The dark-skinned man stood in the gathered crowd. He was darker and browner than Bow Wow. His tunic loose and silky, open at the waist around the sash and spattered with rainbow colors. His hair was enormous, a cloud of dense black curls like a muffin on top of his head. He stood in a hunched position, and he held a straight blade razor. There was a momentary hush, a creaking of floorboards. The counterman spoke. Well, at least you're gonna pay for that food he ate, Daniel. Except maybe that little bit he spit up. Of course I'll pay. The dark-skinned man lowered the razor. He's my man. You have no right to be treating my man like that. He's coming with me. You boys, sit down. The boys did sit down, all but one, who hacked his throat and spat at the dark-skinned man's feet. The dark-skinned man quickly flashed his blade within a hair's breadth of the spitter's face. You want to lick that up, blank face? Don't think I do, Mars. You can't make me. Mars Daniel moved so quickly for a moment he became invisible. The next moment he was standing behind Blankface with a razor at his throat. Course I can, Blankface. Let me show you how. He thrust his arm forcefully and Blankface clattered to his knees, a streak of blood running down his cheek. Lick it up, Blankface. You spat it out. A soft click sounded from the counter, barely audible, but it commanded a fearsome respect. All heads turned. The counterman stood there with a metal object in his hand, some kind of revolving cylinder with a hollow, rod-like appendage. Nobody's going to be doing any licking here tonight, said the counterman. Daniel, you and your partner needs to show us your backsides if you know what's good for you. The dark-skinned man stood upright and a purple flush passed over his face. Only a coward fights with a gun, Soupbone. Soupbone raised the metal object. Well, that don't make you any less dead, do it? Now get. Mars scanned the scruffy crowd and turned to Johnny. Just a bunch of squareheads here anyhow, he said. Let's quit this junkyard.